tuned in to the Keetria Show and listening to SOB, Style of Business, the podcast with your host, Keetria. We aim to highlight the ongoing trek of entrepreneurs and business owners from around the globe, featuring stories that recount their struggles, experiences, and inevitable road to success and self-fulfillment. Welcome to SOB.
This episode is supported by the wonderful creators of Gratitude Plus app, the app that helps you cultivate a daily practice of gratitude. What are you grateful for today? You can download the app now at the App Store or by visiting gratitudeplusapp.com/style of business. Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another hot episode of SOB, Style of Business, the podcast. This is your host, Keetria, and today I have another fantastic guest that's joining us by the name of JM Wong, who is talking to us straight from Hong Kong. JM is a YouTuber. She's an author of a wonderful urban fantasy novel titled Under the Cursed Scythe. And she's also an English teacher. So she's going to be chatting with us, talking to us about her creative process, the novel, of course, and just inspiring us, giving us some tips on how we can, amp up those creative writing skills and do what we need to do to tell our stories the best way that we can. So without further delay, let me go ahead and hand it over to JM. JM, drop us that introduction. Give us a little introduction about yourself, and we will roll forward from there.
Hi, everyone. This is Jolie Wong, and short for JM Wong, and I am a YouTuber, also an author. I've published a book called Under the Cursed Scythe, and I'm being raised and born in Hong Kong. So basically, Cantonese is my first language, and English is my second language. And I really like telling stories to people when I was little. So first I started with just writing, and then I feel like I wanted to tell stories through my mouth, actually through video. So that's why I started doing YouTube as well. It's also helped my career as a teacher because teachers have to speak a lot. And as an English teacher, I have to practice a lot. And I feel like doing YouTube videos could help me to improve my pronunciation and speaking skills. So that's how I started with YouTube. And yeah, that's also how I started with writing English books as well, English stories, because that's also a way for me to tell people about the imaginary world in my head.
Wow. Love that. Yeah. And that's some imagination, as we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about your novel. But just taking a step back real quick, I think you said you started writing, or what I read was you started writing at the age of 8 or 9 when you created your first story, or you started writing your first story rather. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration. How did you get into the creative writing at such a young age? Any inspirations or influences at all, or was that something that you just enjoyed?
Well, I am a huge fan of anime, Japanese animes and cartoons. And when I was little, when I was watching the animes, I always want to know what happened if I'm in the story. So the only way for me to actually make that happen is through writing. So I would write myself into the stories. That's how I started with my first story, where I just put myself into one of the Disney princess movies.
Oh, wow. That is which movie? Which movie was that?
It's a Little Mermaid. That's my favorite.
Okay, yeah. And I know the Japanese anime, even now it's hot. It is definitely one of the, a lot of people are into that. And I don't know if you follow Comic-Con at all, but I know a lot of the characters end up being big fixtures there. So as far as the inspiration, when you first started your first story, can you recall, if there was, a specific theme, or what type of themes are you normally going for, or do you find yourself drawn into when you start your stories?
It's normally magic, fantasy types, because that's the only way where I could, escape from reality. It's I always imagine myself a traveler to the imaginary, magical fantasy world. Yeah. So.
Oh man, do you and you know what? I just thought about the Chronicles of Narnia and those types of films and movies. Do they provide any influence at all, or is that the type of content? Not content, but is that the type of an idea that you have when you talk about the magical worlds and things like that?
Yes, definitely. Like my favorite novel series would be definitely like very cliche Harry Potter. That's the world that brought me into the concept that I could like actually blend in reality with the magical world. Because Harry Potter is like they have stuff that you can see in real life. At the same time, there's magical outworldly stuff. So that's kind of like linking my daily life with something magical. It's a way for me to escape, but at the same time, like stay put, things like this. Yeah.
Yeah, like the wizards and all the sorcery and things like that. And what about like something like a Lord of the Rings type film or something along those lines?
Yeah, Lord of the Rings is one of the genres I would say, but it's not really my thing. The reason it's still like very like distance from reality. It's another world. For me, it's more like it's based on what's happening right now, and then you add a little bit of magical elements into it. Like gives you some assurance or comfort when the bad things happens in real life, and you feel like, oh, perhaps there's a demon behind it. You have imaginations like this, to help you to kind of escape a little bit from reality, I would say.
That is crazy. And okay, so now that we have that. I now have an idea of like some of the things that kind of spurred you into the creative writing and specifically like urban fantasy. But did you have like, okay, so when you started writing when you were younger and obviously kind of continued with that, did you have any novelists or any, specific authors that really drew you into their work to where you said, okay, hey, this is something that I would like to do, and then you started pursuing your own book, which we'll get to. But like, who are some of your influences, like other authors?
Definitely J.K. Rowling, because I love the Harry Potter series. I basically watch her all her documentaries and interviews just to see like how she get to where she is at the point. And yeah, I learned a lot from her. And at a certain period of time, I would say I would want to follow her path, but I realized you cannot follow someone's path like that way. You can make your own path, your own story, things like this, and that's how I changed. But before that, it was definitely J.K. Rowling. And also, if it's like related to comics and animes, it's definitely I'm not sure whether you guys understand, like Clamp. It's a group of artists. It's they're famous for like Card Captor Sakura, these kind of animes, and they're like a team of comic writers. They work together, and I admire, like I envy them. I hope that one day I will have a team where we can work on one concept or a magical world together, and they are also huge influences for me as well.
Got it. So that's more like a collaborative effort, or am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, a collaborative effort.
For like writing? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's more like, it's similar to like DC or Marvel, where they have a group of people who have the same dream about the same world, like adding characters, like a shared universe. These are like the things that I really love and I hope to achieve in the future as well.
Oh, wow. That's cool. All right. So let's dive into, I'm curious to how you set yourself up to write Under Her Cursed Saints, because that novel is, I think, like a little bit over 500 pages. Like that was work, for you to really, put in. And I'm sure that it took you some time, and the book has gotten some great reviews. So give us a little insight into what your creative process looks like. Okay, you have an idea for a book project, obviously. Like, how do you get prepared to write for something like that?
So originally this book, I would say it wasn't the first story idea I had. It's basically like why I started writing is because I went into university and I was taking an English degree, and I realized my English wasn't good enough. And I have this habit that if I'm not good at one subject, I try to make it into something that like I could do it in daily life, like something fun, so I could learn at the same time, could do something that I like. So I thought like, so I'm in an English degree, how can I improve my writing, which is my weakest subject at that point. So I thought of perhaps I just start writing a story, because I love writing very much. But originally I write my stories in Chinese, but then I thought like, why don't I try to write it in English. So that's how I started with like, oh, I want to write a story. And I always have this world in my head, like this magical world I created. I have pictures, I have concepts. I've been doing it when I was like little, but I never like executed. So when I was in university, I took out those notebooks and stuff and read it all again. I thought like, oh, why don't I just work on these stuff? And I began to build on it. So the first story idea, which I thought originally wanted it to be my first novel, wasn't really the story I actually published right now. Okay. It was more like what happens after the book. The book that I've published, like what happens after. Then I was working on that. Then I realized like on Halloween day, it was actually on Halloween, like the week before Halloween. And I was thinking of taking a break from that story. And I wanted to write another story which I could publish on Wattpad. That's what I had thought. Okay. So I have this story idea. I started to work. And when I started work, I realized, oh, I really love this. I feel like it's not just a short story. It can be something more. And that's how it started. Like, I just kind of take a break from that first novel that I originally wanted to work on and just work on this because I feel like this is a story that I want to work on more. So I just jumped right into that story, which originally should be a short story for Halloween.
Oh, wow. So the short story actually, that ended up turning into the debut novel that we now see. And I believe it's on Amazon, right? I know you still had it on Amazon when I checked last. So now it sounds to me like maybe this was something, so you didn't necessarily intend for it to end up as a novel. You just enjoyed writing so much that you just kept going with the short story and it turned into something a little bit bigger, right?
Yes.
That's cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, it happens to me a lot. Like for example, recently I originally want to work on my first novel again, like the original concept that I took a break from. But I end up like going back, like I was thinking of another short story that I was so into it and I began to work on that as well. It's like, it's always like there's story ideas coming to me and I don't allow myself to like, oh, just focus on one story and just limit myself in that because I feel like there are other stories that come to your mind and you can also work on it. So I it's like a free flow for me. There isn't really a deadline. So I jump between stories when I like work on my novels and short stories. Yeah.
That's okay. Now this was the when you just said that you don't focus on one story. The question automatically popped up. How do you keep from getting this content mixed up? Like, how do you stay focused on one story and then then when you get ready to jump to the next one? I guess the biggest thing is like, how do you do this without going into those cross currents or getting confused and not giving enough time to X story versus the Y story?
I think it's because these stories are always circulating, like surrounding this one big world, and somehow it will link to that world eventually. And I have very often, if I'm like into the world construction, I will have this one big notebook where I write all the like structures, like settings, like what kind of things must happen, like what is the rules that must follow in this world, and like what are the principles that will happen, and what are the like characters that must appear in this world, and to make sure I don't go off track, like or something like write something that is contradicting. But because the world I've constructed is quite big, and basically you can put in everything in it. It's just how you link these things together. So it wasn't that difficult when I was thinking about like jumping between stories because it's always surrounding this one big concept. Yeah.
That is okay. So that sounds like maybe a storyboard technique where you kind of plot out the content and the theme for the story before you get started. Is that like a pre-planning phase?
Yes, definitely. I realized because based on the experience I had for my first novel, published novel, I took 5 years to finish, and I think one of the things I found that it will help me to write faster should be like doing the plotting, like do a lot of plotting before actually writing it, or else it will end up 5 years because I keep on like editing the whole thing again, deleting the whole book again, and writing it over again.
Man, that's crazy. Dang, I bet you that's a bit of a headache. Yeah.
Definitely. So I think perfect. The flow, like just to keep the flow going, it's important to have the plotting before actually writing it, or else you have to write the entire plot over and over again. I think I at least did it 5 or 6 times, the entire novel after the first draft. So that was a lesson that I knew I had to learn from that experience. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is, oh man, you deleted it and went back and, oh no. Yeah. I know that was a pain to have to do that. But obviously, I guess that's why the plotting works so well, because if you have a plan going into it, it's probably less of a pain, you're not going to get off track. So I certainly understand that. Okay, so I want to, let me wrap this part up, and then I want to talk about that YouTube channel, because girl, you there's some funny stuff on your channel, and it is definitely entertaining. I know you've been at it for a while, but we'll talk about that in a second. But before we get into that, give us some writing tips. Maybe there's an aspiring writer or somebody who's working on their first novel. How do you? What's a good way to kind of get started and weed out the distractions and to stay focused? And then even maybe if there's any rituals or things like that you adhere to, or something, give us something that we can use to focus on getting these words on paper.
I think definitely when you feel the rush to write, just write. Don't really hesitate on whether my words is good, whether I could already produce something perfect at the first time when you write it. I have this notebook where I just randomly write down words that came to my mind or some ideas. It's super messy, but I feel like when you get the idea onto the piece of paper, it's set, and then somehow when you look it back, you will have something to base on when you think about developing the story from there. So definitely write whenever you have the idea. Just don't care about what the words or grammar. And I think secondly, there are a lot of sources that will inspire you. For me, there are dreams where I clearly remember something that I would definitely have a dream journal where I jot it down. There are conversations. I like to eavesdrop on people's conversation. If I find it interesting, I would just write down how they speak and perhaps jot down something they say, because sometimes their stories are very interesting as well. And it kind of give it a sense that is real to people. And definitely I would say find a peer group where you can share your stories with them. And I feel like peer groups are very important. I went to groups that gave me really good advice on how I can improve my novel. And it's just one section. I could already get a lot from there. So I would say don't be afraid to share your work with others, to actually accept criticisms. They're actually sometimes very good, and it helps you to improve a lot.
Oh, love that. Love that. JM, thanks for sharing those tips. So that's definitely some good information. All right, so let's jump into the blog, which I guess it's a vlog. Let me add the V. Your channel, which is Jolly Molly Wong TV. Now, this is an interesting channel. I like it because, you have so many different things on there. First of all, I like how you visit those different coffee shops, and, there's always some comedy within what you're doing. But recently, which I know a lot of people are experiencing, if not everybody that's maybe listening at this point, the self-quarantine blog that you did, just kind of like a recap of being stuck at home, and which is, I guess for you, is the perfect time to, amp up the creative process. Anybody really to really get creative and make content and the videos. But tell us a little bit about your channel and the inspiration behind it. I know you mentioned earlier it was to better, develop your English skills, which are great, by the way. But yeah, give us a basis of, how you got started with your channel, and then we'll talk about some of the content.
So I wasn't really a person who was good at speaking English at first. Like when I was in year 2, I believe, I was very timid. I didn't have a lot of confidence when I was speaking in front of people. So I saw online, I think it was Liddy Singh, and another YouTuber, very famous YouTuber. And she said like she kind of started filming during her toughest day, and it kind of gave her some confidence. And it gave me this idea that I want to do the same thing. So I started the channel. And at first, it was very awkward. If you go and check out my first video, it's like I don't really get used to speaking in front of a camera. It's really weird. It was a hesitation. It was slow. It was very awkward. But I wanted to do something. I want to try whether it will continue. So I gave myself like, it's like a task every week, like post something. And in fact, I have a lot of things I want to share that I never actually been able to share just on Instagram because there's a limit. And I feel like there's a lot of things I want to talk about. So I also have like random talks, so basically like random things. And to me, this channel is more like a diary for myself, like to see myself improving in terms of like speaking English or the things I do. Like there's huge changes as well, no matter is his appearance or like my hobbies and like even my emotions. Like I could see the changes as well. And the things I like. I originally the cafe videos, which is interesting. I used to hate drinking coffee, and through this channel I can see my like the development of like from hating it, and now I'm like I need to go to cafes all the time. It's an interesting thing, and I used to hate going out very as I've mentioned in my self-quarantine video. I am someone who loves to stay at home all the time. And then when I look at a video, I travel a lot more now, and I kind of miss nature all the time. And now asking me to self-quarantine at home and like trap in here, it's like a new challenge for me, which right. Originally it wasn't a challenge for me when I was in college. So that was a huge change. And this channel just is a thing that makes me happy, and that's why I would always say that now. Originally, I would post like every Sunday, but now it's mainly when I have the mood to do it, because I don't want to make it like a thing that I must do on routine, but more like a things that I enjoy. Like if I have something that I really want to share, then I just share. Yeah.
Love it. Love it, JM. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, yeah, you have to, in a second, I'll let you just give the information of where we can go and follow and connect with you. Because, yeah, there's some good entertaining things on there. And I lost count. I don't know how many cafes you've attended between that and visiting the Facebook and seeing the different coffee cups. So it's really, really interesting and entertaining. So we definitely appreciate you taking the time to be a guest. I know it's late there in Hong Kong, in your area. JM, let us know where we can find you online if there's anybody that wants to connect. I also know that you do motivational speaking, and there's some other things that you're working towards. But if anybody that's listening and wants to be in touch, make sure you drop your social media handles, website, or just any contact information you'd like to share.
Sure. So you can find me on YouTube is Jolly Molly Wong, JOLYMOLLYWONG TV, and my Instagram, where you can look for my latest like stories, ideas, or like artworks, would be just j.n.wong. That's me.
All right, and then the Urban Fantasy Under Her Curse Scythe. Where can we grab that?
Amazon, Book Depository, Kobo. I think basically where you can find. Most online bookshops have that. So I think mainly Amazon and Book Depository.
All right, sounds good. And you know what I forgot to ask you, but I'll go ahead and throw it in here. JM, leave us with some words of encouragement before we wrap up.
I believe this is the time, like since we are self-quarantined, it's the time for us to develop new talents and passions. And it's time to work on stuff that we never had the time to do when we were busy with work and, school. So I think, definitely it's time for you to try something and like do not waste this opportunity.
Do not waste this opportunity. Got it. Love it so much, JM. Thanks so much. Again, JM Wong, thanks for visiting. You take care, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us here on SOB. We hope this episode has been resourceful. If you'd like to check out the latest articles or follow Keetria's website updates, just log on to Keetria.com or follow her on Twitter at KEETRIA.